First of all, thank you to all of you who are here or on Zoom and for coming and supporting this Sangha just by your attendance, just by receiving these teachings in this way, and also for your financial support, of course. Please continue to support us if you can. Very much appreciated. Can't do this without your help. This is not particularly a business. I don't recommend it. However, it is a spiritual path. And if you have questions about what makes it that way, I'd be happy to respond to those later. The title or topic of today's Dharma talk is Panca-Dharma. Pancha means 5, Dharma means truth or law or form. Something I've talked about before, but I usually give it the title, The 5 Dharmas. And I thought this might be a different way to name the same thing. A lot has been said about this in different ways by Bodhirishi and Gunabhadra in the Lankavatara Sutra, and by, what is the other? Shikshananda. And if you read Lanka, it's, if you're very scholarly and smart, which I am not, and not false humility here, just a description, you may love that text, or you may dislike it, as I think Chisho doesn't like it very much. I'm not sure if Chisho is here somewhere. Oh, there he is. And we won't ask him why he doesn't like it, because we'll just get a bunch of opinions. So 5 Dharmas. Panca-Dharma. The first one is things appear. Your life appears. Your thoughts appear. Mice appear in the cupboard. Things appear. We name them. There's the first 2. Something appears and we do something with it. We refer to it in some way. Probably even before there was any really definite or developed a language with human beings, there were some kind of a signal. Maybe it was just a grunt about this or about that, helping us to communicate, protect ourselves, advance what we want to do, get more food, reduce what we want to reduce, build a fire so it's not so cold. All of those condition us as human beings to push and pull and grasp and release and go after something and run away from something. It's just all over, and it's been around here for, who knows, millions of years. So what happens is that gets so conditioned and so ingrained that we start feeling like there's somebody who's seeing, somebody who's pushing and pulling. So that also arises, the idea of a self, of a separate being who is showing up. I'm the one who likes this or doesn't like, or I'm the one who is her sister or his brother, father, mother, all the various things that we give names to. So things arise, we name them, and then the next thing we do is we project ideas onto them. We have ideas, it's a good thing, a bad thing, it shouldn't be, they shouldn't be doing that, I should have more say-so about that, on and on and on. It just tumbles all over, and it gets extremely confusing because there are so many innumerable, uncountable so-called moving parts to what is not doing much at all, actually. Things arise. I'll go through it again. Things arise. Your thoughts arise. Your emotions arise, and may be triggered by something someone said, something that happened to you. There may be some kind of a trigger that you can't even see that has to do with what? Maybe your health, the condition of your health has slowly been going this way or that way without you being able to witness it because it's in your digestive tract. Or maybe it's something happening in your brain. Something arises, we give it a name, and then we begin to add on what we think about it, what it is, what it shouldn't be, what it should be. We add on our propaganda, our ideas about it, which can give us the feeling of being in control, or maybe we're not in control. We can't seem to control this situation. So if you were to go into the Lankavatara Sutra and read all about this, it's extremely complicated. There's a lot of opinions about what this meant, what that meant, how which one of the 10 bhumis that a particular state of mind or way of working with this is tied into as you approach enlightenment, awakening. So, and if you stumble into or are drawn into the teaching of the Buddha, the awakened one, who historically lived 2,500 years ago and has been teaching ever since, then you may get to the fourth of the 5 dharmas, which is Buddha knowledge, or knowledge about awakening, knowledge about what this actually is, knowledge about awakened truth. And that knowledge can show up very conceptually. Might be different for each one. You might be relating to the Four Noble Truths, suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way you accomplish that through the path. Or it may be the 5 skandhas, form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness, that area of working with that may seem to be making more and more, maybe not exactly sense. And when it makes sense, you can just about tell somebody about it. But if it doesn't make actual sense, but there's something happening beyond the reason or the logic, something beyond that, you begin to see that the 5, speaking of another Panca-Skandha, 5 skandhas, is form, this body, feeling. This is arising. This is something that arises. We come right back to the first of the 5 dharmas. Feeling arises. We give it a name, anger. Then we add to it. If she hadn't done that, I wouldn't be angry. We actually build a whole superstructure of meanings, ideas, concepts, logic, praise and blame, praise and blame. You get praise for this and blame for that. We buy into that situation. Makes things seem more clear to that part of the consciousness that seems to be a self or an ego. Propaganda, the logic of that area, ego. Narcissism, self-centeredness, me, and my stuff, my ideas, my concepts, my ideas, my opinions. Most of the world runs like this. There are a few places where people are endeavoring to see what is this? The talk I gave on after following Dogen's idea there of deep thinking. Quite often the idea is to stop thinking or don't think. But the way Dogen talked about it is to actually think, but not add to the thinking. Have the thinking arise out of conditioned arising, out of everything else. Stop meddling with reality, thinking it is your playground. Don't meddle with anything. And what is reality? That's the last of the 5 dharmas, suchness, or this. So something arises, we name it, it's a hand, we add to it, it's my hand. I'm looking at the palm part of the hand instead of the back of the hand. You can't look at the palm and the back at the same time. Or can you? So something arises, we add on the name. Then we add on, sprinkle a few more condiments on it. Got it to 30 seconds?
We haven't gotten to the 5th one yet.
Oh, the 5th one. Didn't I mention that already? This is going to make it more fun. When you run into this part and think, there's no way I can plug this into 60 seconds. That's why I asked you about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Huh? You saw that? Okay. It rises, we name it, we interpret it or analyze it or take it or reject it, passion, aggression, and ignorance. And then somewhere in there, we stumble into the teaching, reality, teaching of the Buddha's Dharma, or possibly some other way of approaching this. There's no, Buddhism doesn't have a corner on it. It just, but it has a lot more than a city block. When you and I were just looking at what was it, a diagram, the lineages coming from the Buddha, from the Adi Buddha, the primordial Buddha before Shakyamuni, and all of the different characters and all the lines running down into the Madhyamaka, the various Vajrayana schools in Tibet, and all of the offshoots from them to this direction and that direction, and it's complicated. It's extremely complicated. So I will leave that, after naming all of that, I will leave that to the scholars, because I don't have the chops to work with that in a meaningful way. But I do have something. And what is that? The 5 dharmas are just one thing. It's going to look like a path until it doesn't. And then when you get through the Buddha knowledge, which means study the Lankavatara Sutra, study the Samdhima Sutra, study all of the sutras, study together, study as a community, as a sangha, interact around this material. Listen to the teacher, not only this teacher, but any other teacher that is helpful to you. You might be studying the Sin Sin Ming or the Diamond Sutra. Who wrote the Diamond Sutra? We don't really know. We know who translated it. A few people have translated that. Read that material is very important. That's where you begin to understand the 4th one, which is knowledge. It's not completely conceptual knowledge, but it is backed up by that. Just like the teaching of the 5 dharmas is Buddha knowledge in its structural form, but it hasn't quite gotten to the ultimate pointing. So we could go into that. We could ask questions about that, perhaps. My understanding is you can see this, even if you don't have the Buddha knowledge, you can still awaken to reality. Sometimes those are seen a little bit interchangeably, because some people are so present that they just have to be dumped off that cliff into reality, either by their own karma. There's plenty of room for questions when we get to that, around what I'm saying by karma. Or you may need to go through structures. That's why the way I try to relate to whatever students are here, to meet them where they're at, so that I can see more clearly what is going to be the very best way for this person to work with the Dharma. Maybe they need to do a tantric approach of creation completion practices. Some of that's available right now, not totally. The simplest way is to sit down, hold still, and watch what the mind does, because the mind is the Buddha, not separate from it. Even have banners in here that more or less shout this at you. Mind is Buddha. for perception only. Excuse me. So the last one is suchness, or as it is in the glossary of the Lankavatara Sutra that Red Pine translated and has an incredible commentary on. If you go to the glossary to say, let's see what he has to say about that. I did that this morning. Guess what he said? It was so helpful. He doesn't know either. He doesn't know how to put that into words. So what did he say? Reality. Thanks, Red Pine. You were here, right? I've been scolding. So suchness, my understanding of it is that the whole structure that has led up to that realization has dropped away. Maybe not disappeared, like gone somewhere else, so you see some kind of relative emptiness everywhere you look, you don't see anything. No, everywhere you look, you don't see anything else. You don't see any, it's empty of the apparent otherness of it. It's gone. And what you see is unreal. It's an illusion. Suchness. You could even say, I could even say, we all could even say, it's not even an experience. It's like no experience. You've just stopped covering up your Buddha nature. You've stopped covering up reality with what arises, your naming, your interpretation, your rumination around whatever arises into personalizing it, depersonalizing, doing something with it somehow, not allowing it to just be that. Because if you didn't add passion, aggression, and ignorance to it, you may actually see what it is. And sometimes in the teachings, like in the Tokyo Zanmai, this is the image there is like a mirror. It's the mirror-like wisdom. Because you look at it and it's like it's looking back at you, but it's not spooky. It's like, it's not going to do that to you, particularly. Something arises, we name it, we interpret it or add to it or explain it, justify it, blame something, credit something. We go any number of directions that I could go on, and you could do. We could all think of how do we take what shows up that we name and run different directions with it, using our emotions, using our tendency to conceptualize, or our tendency to try to do guesswork around it, speculate on it. Or some people are wired in such a way that it just leaves them without even the space of an either or. It dumps them into a space very similar to what happens when you practice shikantaza, especially if you've been practicing it for years. You can't do this in 3 days, 3 years. As far as I can see, maybe you can. So naming, arising, naming, interpreting, the Buddha helping you, or the Buddhist teaching helping you see that is unreal. That whole situation is unreal, insubstantial. Using concepts, ideas, pointers, this way and that, all the different sutras, all the different teachings down through the centuries. It's a cumulative tradition. It's not revealed like theistic traditions are. Here's the one who knows, just tie in with that guy because he's got a direct connection to the Dharmakaya or something, to the ultimate truth. Some people need to do it that way. They should do it. We should do it that way. Sometimes this shows up in the East as bhakti yoga, or devotion to the teacher. You could also have a little bit of that, but not too much. You could have quite a bit of intellectual discussion, speculation, thinking about it, but not too much. So that's sometimes why the Buddha's Dharma is called the middle way. Not too tight, not too loose. And then through your practice, through your training the mind, the intellect, working with the community, the Sangha, working with the teacher, working with whatever teaching you're studying. Could be the Lanka, could be the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, could be something that I've said, could be something that Trungpa Rinpoche said, could be something that Gopanjina Roshi said, could be something that Dogen said, or all the other teachers. Just go down through the list of the ones, the various teachers in the Zen tradition that Chiezan has been talking about once a week for the last few months. All those lineage holders in different ways that they understood and then taught, perhaps totally differently than their teacher did, and pointing at what? They're all pointing at the same thing. Dozens and dozens of ways up the mountain, but there's only one peak. That doesn't mean we're all one. That's a misunderstanding and just perpetuates more confusion. Make no statement. Don't conclude. If you conclude, it creates again, doesn't create duality, but creates the illusion of duality. It's over here that can't find that other hand until it does. And when it does, allowing duality coming together when it was never really separate. Suchness, or as Red Pine had it in his glossary, reality is not something, it's not a thing, it's beyond that. You could say, as it does in the Yogacara tradition, it is consciousness only, or as that banner up there says, perception only. There's no object that's perceived. There's no person who perceives. Gone. You could say they've come together, but even that's a little bit extra. That kind of reinforces the duality part of it. It's less than that. It's more than that. And the other thing I often say is, it's worse than that. It's devastating to the ego. The ego does not want to see this. It does not want to do it, and it will fight even someone on the path. When they start to get close to the edge of the ditch in the dark, you don't want to go there because you know that's devastating. The amazing thing is, as has been said way before I got here, you begin to fall, and you fall, and you fall, but you never hit bottom because there is no bottom. There is no bottom, and there's no conclusion because nothing has happened. This is an ultimate teaching. Do I have the credentials to teach this? I get my credentials from what I'm looking at. I don't need Lankavatara Sutra, and you won't either. You won't need anything. You won't need me. You won't need to quote me. If you see it yourself, the mind of the teacher and the mind of the student are no longer separate. They never have been, but the student thinks they are for a while. Suchness. It's not an experience. May be experiential for a while, and it may not. If there are questions, I'd be happy to respond. Sir?
It feels like sometimes study or relating to the teachings introduces some distance from the emotional dynamic for me. I wonder if that intellection gets in the way of feeling to the center of the earth.
No, still path. Still path. As long as you're returning, if you'll notice, every time you return, it's never quite the same. You can't find the same thing happening over and over again. If you find the same thing happening, then that starts to build a construct of time, that of past and future and happening and not happening. There isn't anything but this. Don't believe that. I'm not asking you to drop your own perception, your own insight, your own mind, do anything other than consider what I'm saying. Considering it seems to be enough, because that way when you do go to the wall, when you do go to train your mind, then you're always at square one. It's always, as Suzuki Roshi said 60, 70 years ago, beginner's mind. There's always you never get anywhere. There's no progress. There's no pilgrim's progress. There's no pilgrim. There's no progress. There's no mountain. But it has to start somewhere. So why not start right where you're at? As who said that? Some famous nun, Emma. But we'll have none of that. Not funny. please.
Good bowing. Does form show up in suchness or perception only?
Yes. Go ahead.
Good bowing. What is form if it's not projection of an object or a separate thing?
What is it if it's not that? Then it's that. If it's not that, then it has to be that. Be using your step ladder. You have a step ladder?
Did you just do it?
I didn't do anything. You did. You actually did it. How do you do that? Receive. Receive. There's nowhere to go. Nothing to get. Suchness. It's ultimate truth is not an experience. It's experiential. There's something happening there, but it's no different than walking through the grass barefooted. It might be walking through the snow barefooted.
It is form something, when you use the word form or form in the five skandhas, is that something other than thingness that we project?
Paraphrase yourself.
What are you pointing at when you say form?
Emptiness. Form and emptiness. Emptiness is form is emptiness. I've heard that teaching before. Somebody thought that up before we got here. More questions about that if you have it.
For there to be form, does there have to be a distinction between that shape and the background?
A little bit. Otherwise you wouldn't set the table, you'd set the wall. You can't do that. You make a fool of yourself. Your guests would be very embarrassed for you. But if you were to do that, and we're not see any different, then they would think it was quite funny.
So what is it like to see a shape or an object and not project that it's something else?
Stillness. Nothing happens. Stillness. In the midst of the confusion, stillness. It's not a stillness that you stop the movement. You in the movement. It needs to happen in the fire. Shoto.
Is there a path quality or a progression between the five dharmas?
I think so. We understand it. Something appears, and then we notice, we name it. It just if it happens out here, then it's very obvious. But in the mind, so sometimes I use the purple alligator idea to show that it's available. Consciousness is available to everything, everybody. You can have a great deal of fun with that. It's quite entertaining. What do you want to know?
Are the five dharmas saying that we need those first three to see suchness? Like, do we need that misunderstanding?
It looks like probably. The karma that has come before this lifetime it's very difficult to find out what happened there. There are people who are, the example I often use is Byron Katie, which some of you know about her practice. It took her a long time to actually recommend that people meditate. She kept trying to help people do it with their intellect, like ask 4 questions, turn it around, try to get the intellect to see alone. And I think now she tells people to meditate. Probably got tired of whining to them. So spontaneous realizer, the story of her, and I have to paraphrase a little bit. I don't remember exactly what it was, and I wasn't there. But she was in a halfway house. She had drug issues, I think. This is 25, 30 years ago. And a bug crawled across her leg, and her personhood, her attachment to a self dropped. We don't know the causes and conditions by that. I'm sure it wasn't the first three dharmas particularly. She wasn't going through that necessarily, but maybe a version of that, maybe just naturally. She's quite a brilliant woman, and she's kind of I call her a spontaneous realizer, that someone in the midst of samsara without the Buddhist path just realizes that there really is no real being anywhere. There's no self anywhere. But I've never talked to her, so I don't know what that's like for her. But it's possible. Very unlikely. It's very unlikely for that to happen without some kind of a structure. This structure here will help you, you could say, take advantage of this lifetime of having, because you didn't decide to be born. At least if you did, you probably don't remember that decision. And why would you come here anyway? I remember asking myself when I was 3 or 4 years old, kind of a question. It was a very vivid memory of this. Why did I come back here? Well, what is that, assuming that I had been here before? Because that was what I had said to myself when I was very, very young. And there was no answer, and so I dropped the whole thing. Went on from there. But the memory of asking that question was quite strong.
How's it going?
Mm-hmm.
How are the first and fifth dharmas different?
The first one is when something arises, you immediately impute that there's something there. Whereas the fifth one of suchness, you see that both things are there and they're not there. That's why I use the alligator in the kitchen, or I use the example, as many teachers do, of dreams. Dreams are both real and unreal. They're real because you had them, and the nightmare scared you, but then you wake up and, oh, that wasn't true. So this is the nightmare that you can awaken from while you're in the middle of it. That's what I was saying. In the fire, stillness. In the fire, ice cubes. The polarity is always the same and different. More? Yes, sir.
I think you said the self appears when we name something. So is the appearance of form without the imputation of the self?
What do you want to know?
I think I want to know if there is some perception of form that is without a self.
There is, but you would not particularly define it that way. It just wouldn't be separate. So there you wouldn't perceive form. The perception would just be only. There'd be no form. There'd be no perceiver. Just perception. And that would happen. Initially, it would happen through the sense fields if there's a living being. But when there's no living being, that doesn't necessarily stop. Nor does it particularly go on. Well,
can we differentiate the first three dharmas, like see them in action?
I think so. Something appears. Our lifetime. We're born, so we appear. And then people teach us how to name. They give us a name. Have you noticed that? And then when you met me, I gave you a name. What is your name?
Choose.
What does that mean?
Freedom mountain.
Why do you think I would give you that name? Well said. You will. Further questions? Yes.
Is it helpful to try to see those three
Sure.
dharmas in action?
Yes. Be aware. Use the teaching just as literal and as pragmatic as you can. Look, something appears, give it a name, and then we project onto it. Just the projections just come out of our memory and all over the place. This was gifted to me by Sokuzan a few years ago, and I know who made it. Ian Forsberg made this. So I know that it was he hired an army of little ants to carve it. Well, I'm not supposed to say that, am I? So we could add on, we can imagine things, we can go to the actual so-called fact of this or that or the other thing. What kind of wood is this? I don't know. Well, should we just know what kind of wood this is? How would you know it? Would you give it a name?
You could just guess,
Bamboo.
like walnut.
I never heard it said that. Mike Walnut?
Yeah,
Mike Walnut.
like walnut.
Ian, are you out there? Where did you find all that Mike Walnut at? The names are, you can play with them. If you rename something, you change the dynamic. Sometimes I say when people are having really, really difficult depression, and they're especially, not always, but especially if they're meditators and they can't back away from that, just a way of saying it, or can't see that it's unreal, then I might say, give it another name. Every morning that you get up and you're depressed, don't say, I'm still depressed, or don't go into that. Just give it a different name. Call it names that don't have anything to do with, typically with depression. Like, I suppose I should think of something, shouldn't I? Let's see, let me hook into my imagination here. Fried eggs. That would tie in with breakfast. But then if you slept in all day and woke up in the afternoon, it would probably have to be hot dogs. The idea is to use things appear, we name them to maybe to work right in that area. But you have to be a meditator at the same time. There has to be some kind of sit down, hold still, watch the movement of the mind come and go without grasping it, without rejecting it, and without ignoring it. And those three things that I just said don't do, you can't help but do those. But by saying don't do that, then you actually tune into, because you're putting some resistance on that, you're able to see how you're compelled, it's compulsive to do that. That's karma. We're seeing the karma. You are slowly, may take lifetimes. If you're sitting here, I think you can do it right now. You wouldn't be listening to me. What I'm saying wouldn't make any sense to you. It would be, or I'm going to go listen to Thich Nhat Hanh or Dalai Lama, or go find a famous teacher. You have a question, or are you just praying?
Sure, with that technique where you taught to change the name of something, I've
Yes.
noticed that if I change the name of something that I'm taking really seriously, it can offend me or like upset me. What is that? That's
Ego. Yeah, ego, because the ego, that's the ego territory of is depression, or addiction, or jealousy. And the ego, as soon as it starts to get threatened, it will start to generate more of the third one. Something arises, you name it, and then we add on all of our. So if you get jealous about something and you notice the jealousy wants to live too, and it will look for a self to generate that. And so constant little stories will unravel like confetti. There's so many of them, you can't stop them. So that's why it's necessary to do it at the get-go, at the beginning. But face the wall, find out who you are. Don't get your identity from me or from anything or from your thought patterns. You are not a separate being. You're not separate from anything. Your consciousness is not separate from the center of the earth or the middle of the cosmos. Not separate from it. Separated down into this temporarily, this 60, 70 years or whatever lifetime, longer than that, perhaps, that you're alive. It feels like you're somebody going somewhere with an agenda or an idea or an ability to build things, or an ability to keep track of things, like an accountant or another person might be, can't work with that, but they're a musician, so they can play music or they can sing. Any number of things. There isn't a single area out there that you couldn't stumble into and participate in the first three dharmas. Things arise, your job arises, and it's called pipe fitter. And you go do that, and then I am a pipe fitter. You add yourself onto that. And we just go and go and go in that area. But what I would say is, want to do some add on the practice every day. Get up, spend some time, sit down, hold still, watch what moves, train your mind. You need to become a officially a Buddhist, I can help you with that. If you don't want to do that, if you'd rather just meditate, then do that. But meditation is the important part, not just joining this or swearing some kind of a vow or something to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. May be necessary, may be very necessary. Certainly was for me. Further questions?
Kayun bowing.
Well, okay, so there'll be Kayun, and then Chisho, and then Navid. And if I miss somebody, then you can let me know later. Go ahead, Kayun.
Kayun bowing. What is the form of emptiness? Bowing.
Did you break your plate?
I hit a fork.
Oh, well, I won't break. What is the form of what?
Emptiness. Bowing.
So the initial idea there with the teaching of emptiness or shunyata is to see that things that we think are something are empty of our imputation about it. So it might start out by being, this doesn't belong to anyone. So there's no ownership. So it might be there, or it might be, we might feel like this has a kind of otherness to it that it doesn't actually have. So it's empty of our imputation, our projections, our ideas, our conclusions, our analysis of that. It's empty of that. It's just this. And from the point of view of these teachings, the ultimate understanding is suchness. It's not separate from anything, nor is it together with everything. The polarities are gone. It's to such an extent that there isn't even that. So have to work through it progressively. The emptiness teachings also go so far as to say that everything is empty of emptiness. Even emptiness is empty. So here, what are we tied into? We're looking at concepts about something that can't be seen or understood in the relative way, but we need to approach it somehow. So we approach it by, as I say, don't add, don't subtract, don't divide. And then by saying that, when you sit on the cushion or in your life, everyday life, you notice how you can't help but do that. Can't help but add, subtract, divide, push on things, pull on things, blame people for things. But your clarity about the blaming will be much more clear that you're actually watching something arise, you're an emotion, and then you're pointing at someone else rather than being responsible for how you feel. If you have anything arise in your mind stream, it is yours, not yours, the ego, but yours, the consciousness that is not separate from consciousness everywhere. There's only consciousness. There's not your consciousness, my consciousness. That's part of the delusion. And if you realize this while you are still, while this body-mind complex that you call me is arising in consciousness, you'll see that it's unreal. And you'll see that that which it is arising in, everyone is arising. Every so-called singularity of a human form is arising in that consciousness. I'm not saying we're all one. That's a idealistic ego language. Not true. We're not all one. Have another one?
Kayun bowing. I feel conceptually I understand the form as emptiness part conceptually, but then as it's phrased in the Heart Sutra, emptiness is form. That kind of stops my mind. I'm wondering how it works the other direction.
Form is emptiness?
Yeah, form is emptiness. I could see that, like the thing that I'm calling the refrigerator is made of component parts that were brought together in disparate ways, and there's no.
Yeah, and you're seeing that's emptiness.
I'm relating that to form is emptiness.
Okay, then what are you relating to emptiness as form?
That's where I get lost.
But the getting lost is the teaching. Getting lost. It is not, it is transcendental dyslexia. And it won't bother you. It'll only bother you if there's a self operating there behind the curtains that needs to know right from wrong, success and failure, and is hooked on results, hooked on identity, hooked on being somebody, hooked. It's the addiction to a separate self. And you have to see the addiction and go through the pain of seeing that you're grasping at something that is unreal. And it is so incredibly greedy and selfish to do that. And greedy and selfish is, of course, judgmental words, but you just start somewhere with it. They're not even greedy and selfish because ultimately there is no one. So that's why all dharmas are without blame. You can't find a culprit anywhere. This doesn't mean that the society, which is nuts, is constantly looking for right and wrong and blame. That's why if we keep operating this way without a spiritual leader, not me, but some kind of someone who understands what this is, a Chakravartin, a leader who can see what this is and help people fundamentally by being a leader. I don't know if a Buddha, there's the spiritual word for the world leader is a Buddha, and the mundane leader is a Chakravartin, or one who turns the wheel. Chisho.
Keshwaving. So I have a question or a few questions around ego and the five dharmas.
Okay.
Maybe the bluntest way to ask is, are the form, not the appearance, but the naming and adding on to it and the knowledge, are they another definition of ego?
Yes. Yes, they are. Very good.
Keshwaving. So is there any relationship at all between ego and the last dharma, fifth dharma?
No, because they're not separate, so there can't be a relationship. Relationship is the language of relative truth. We need to use that. That's why Trungpa Rinpoche one time said the best relationship is no relationship. But if you think that you've isolated yourself on the top of a mountain and you're not going to have a relationship with anybody anymore, that is not what he meant. What he meant, as I see it, is that no matter who you're relating to, it isn't someone else. There is no elseness. So therefore, even though the relationship is going on, past the salt, or is there any more spaghetti sauce? Even though that's going on with someone that is empty of a self, of any self. So, more?
So, in that sense, there is no separation or I won't even call it relationship between tatata and appearance, what appears. There is no real difference or relationship.
Between, did you say tatata?
Yeah, fifth and the first.
Yes, that's suchness, tatata. And the one who comes thusly or in suchness is the tathagata. The same word, same Sanskrit word, tata. And it's one who, there isn't even any coming, there isn't any going. The whole idea of movement is seen to be unreal. Naveed.
Naveed bowing. My question is similar to Kayan's and Chisho's. If we see the suchness of reality, will that still be illusion? Bowing.
So if you see what that word is pointing to, if you actually see that, then it won't be necessarily delusional, but it also won't be separate from delusion, because nothing is separate from anything. When the words fall away, there's just this. But when we see what this is and we need to talk about it, then the words come back. We use the words. And so you would see it, but you would only use the word like suchness or tathagata or tatata in order to talk. But what you're talking about can't be described. More? Naveed?
That helped. Thank you.
Welcome. Any questions in here? Don't scratch your nose or I'll call on you. Yes.
You're bowing. So if what we're talking about can't be described, then what can be said, bowing?
Not much. Help me out here.
Are you
Okay, any more
bowing?
questions?
So do we just sit in silence?
Well, no, I'm not going to go that far with it. But you asked me what can be said. Go ahead.
When you're bowing, so when you as a Dharma teacher point, is that just getting us close to what this is? And then we have to leap and see it ourselves?
You have to do it yourself. Yes, and sometimes I may push you pretty hard. I don't really make decisions about things. I don't do either ors. Sometimes they show up and I just don't do anything. If my own mind stream is going, do you need to do, to myself, I'm saying, do I need to do this or this or this? I just look at it as stuff coming and going. I don't decide between that. And then if one of them drops away, then I might not do anything right away. But if that is there, then I might go in that direction. I might make a statement about that or say something to someone or to myself, or I might do something. But it's dependently arisen rather than selectively arisen through some kind of orientation demanded by the oligarch we call ego, the dictator in the mind stream and the seventh consciousness that doesn't like this and really loves this over here because this is just wonderful. I need more of that. Who can I lobby to get me more of that, whatever it may be? That polarity. We just drive ourselves nuts with that. One more. I'm going to go to someone else here in a minute, but you go first.
When you're bowing, so is the whole 2,500 years of the accumulated teachings
Yes.
simply pointers?
You could say that, yes. And it's going to be different with each person, different teachers. I'm not everybody's teacher. No way you could do that. We need different ways of doing this and of teaching this so that someone can have some confidence, enough confidence to actually listen to the words of a teacher who is endeavoring to teach out of what they're looking at, the Buddha's Dharma. If you teach out of just the Buddha knowledge alone, the first, the fourth of those three, those five, I'm not saying that couldn't be realization too, perhaps on some level, or suchness, or tatata. Bob Meissner, you have a question?
Bob bowing. I will be the first to admit that I'm addicted to a separate self. And yet I am confused, and my question is around the difference between you had said just in today's talk, polarities. They're the same and they're different, and then yet everything is the same. So I get confused. What do you mean by polarities when everything is the same?
So Yeah, exactly that, which it can't be described. So we use that kind of a conundrum to get your consciousness to loosen up its grip on the imaginary self, which is what's happening. When you say I get confused, you might think that's a negative thing, but that's very positive to me, because that's how it feels to study this path. It gets worse. And so if you're ready to do this, if your inspiration to be on this path is powerful enough, either the inspiration of the Buddha's words, the inspiration of your teacher or the community or some particular person in your life, then you might be able to continue and go, because it can be very, very difficult and frustrating, up to and including what's happened to me in a few cases where people that have been a student of mine for a long time just can't do this anymore. And some of that could be attributed to, I'm trying to teach them, and they don't want that teaching. So it's been said, and I'll say it again, everything if you're a student, then everything the teacher does is a teaching. It would have to be. But that doesn't mean that if you see your teacher abusing somebody, that you don't say something about it. But say it to the teacher. Don't say it don't gossip. So in your situation, I would say the downside is how you feel about it, the way you're expressing it, the confusion. But the upside is this is how it begins to feel when the ego starts to get caught in the middle of the Buddha's Dharma. When it comes out of a book you may be reading or a teacher you may be listening to, then just keep going. Get back to the wall, sit down, hold still, and watch that, because that won't, just based on the teaching of impermanence, that can't withstand any kind of scrutiny. Even that will start to come apart. Everything will come apart that is constructed, which is the very nature of relative truth, constructed or also imaginary, both of them. Welcome. Yes, sir.
Bowing. I don't recall what you said, but looking at someone teaching just out of Buddha knowledge, if there's a teacher just teaching out of that in a community trying to learn from that person, is it a mundane path if they haven't seen the fifth Dharma?
It would be difficult to comment too much on it. If you're asking me, I couldn't say it conceptually or abstractly. I couldn't really decide on that. But if I can meet the person, all I have to do is talk to a person for a few minutes. Not because I'm a mind reader. There is no mind, so you don't need to read minds. Thoughts are just extra. You don't need to read anybody's mind. Just interact with someone for a few minutes, and you can see that if you've seen the nature of your own confusion, you've seen what a fool you are, then you can recognize fools everywhere. And because that foolishness shows up in so many different ways, and if that person functions as a student of yours, then you might be able to give them some feedback that will support them, not doing it for them, not about believing somebody or worshiping somebody, but it's about giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. Listen to what that person says. Train your mind. Find out who you are. So when this body-mind complex goes back into the elements, fire, water, air, earth. Let's say the other one. Ether. Yeah. Kefir. Then you won't mind, because you're not just a biological body. You're much, much more than that. It's so much more than that even you can't measure it. It doesn't have a structure of being able to be measured, because it is beyond this and also not separate from it. Not two, and that's what leads. As Bob, that's what's leading you into this. You're seeing what's being said to you is what looks like two different things are not separate from each other. So you have to do that with your consciousness. Andre?
When practicing Shikantaza, sitting still, facing the wall, for instance, a motorcycle is heard outside or a plane above, is it just receiving when we have an image of the plane or communication about them?
Same thing. The only job to do on Shikantaza hold still and watch the movement. And it could be in your mind, it could be the sound of a motorcycle, it can be planning what you're going to do tomorrow. Shikantaza, this is not shamatha vipassana or any other mindfulness practices or so on. I don't teach those. I'm not against them. If you have a teacher that teaches that, then listen to what she says or he says. If you have a teacher, that's your connection as a teacher, not the teaching. This is taught lots of different ways. The way I'm teaching it is out of what I'm looking at. I don't know how else to say it other than that. I don't need to look around for answers to your question or anyone's. So watch what moves. And the way you do that is to take everything that you can that you think you are, and I emphasize that you think you are, hold it still, and then watch what continues to move in the mind stream. The motorcycle you hear, you might imagine, if you're into motorcycles, you might be able to tell the difference between a 650 BSA and a 70, what is it, 74 cubic centimeter, no, cubic inch Harley. All you motorcycle people can come and dismantle me. More?
No, no.
Sir. Okay.
Yoga bowing. What is transcendental dyslexia?
I'm just using that as to say it's just, you don't know one from the other, you don't know right from left, and it's transcendental because it goes into, beyond the otherness that's even there in the first place, to where you can see that the otherness, this and that, are actually superimposed on reality, on tatata, or on suchness, or on what is being pointed at by reality, the word reality. Go ahead.
Yoga bowing. Does suchness fuel transcendental dyslexia?
Suchness doesn't have any otherness to it. It's a word that is basically is just saying totality. You could say, if you needed a relative word, totality, but you can't even say totality, because if it's a totality, then you couldn't even comment on it, because then there would be a commentator. So it's worse than that, and it's better than that. It's worse because it's devastating. It can be extremely, and the pain that you can have in the ego can be without any language. It just can be, and I'm not saying that everyone's going to have to go through this, because everyone's karma is different, but some people have to go through really intense, what is could be talked about in the idea of the six realms: the realm of desire, the hell realm, the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm, the human realm, the realm of the jealous gods, and the God realm. Someone may have to go through hell without any knowing even what it is. And that's why I would say you may have to go see a therapist, but I prefer that you don't. I prefer that you do it with your own consciousness. You go through hell yourself. Who you are can't come to an end. Who you actually are cannot be terminated, because it has not arisen. That which is arisen is going down. This human form comes up, is around for a while, looks around, comes to a few conclusions or exclusions, and goes back into the elements. But who you are can't disappear. It cannot vanish, because it has never appeared. It's beyond the relative situation. Chisho.
Ishabhavin is seeking relationship or contrast, even if it is scientific or dispassionate. Is that a form of grasping? Well,
Yes, but just being aware of it, that keeps it from being too much aggression. So you need some grasping. I need to grasp this to pick it up, or to pick up my fork, or to put on my robes, or anything. You need some of that. It's when it goes over the top and starts protecting an imaginary self that doesn't want to be wrong, that needs to be right. I could say, another thing I could say is what I'm speaking out of, how can I say this without being too foolish? Well, that's going to be impossible right there. I'll say it like this. If you see this, you will not be concerned with what's going to happen next, because there is no next. There's only this. There's no past, there's no future. You actually see it. And you can't necessarily go and tell your mom or your dad or somebody about this wonderful thing you're looking at. They'll just say, you might want to see a therapist. I know a really good one. They will tell you this. So I wouldn't particularly, that's why I say to people, don't discuss your practice with people. That doesn't mean that in a book study or with your Sangha brothers and sisters, you don't talk about these, the Lankavatara Sutra, the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, or anything that I've said. You don't discuss that. Of course you do. That's very important to do that. But what you're going through, you could say internally, mind your own business there and keep it to yourself. No gossiping about anything. Yes, sir.
Do the 5 dharmas address what we do with the projections?
What is it you want to know? I'm going over your question a couple of times, but it's looking like you're missing something there. What are you missing?
It just looks to me like the 5 dharmas don't directly address that I can't seem to help but do something with what I'm projecting. Yes. And so I'm just wondering how to work with that.
You're doing it. Yes, you do. Just continue to do that. Don't look for results. This is the mundane path of getting a degree in psychology and getting a certificate and being part of the whole. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that too, but the spiritual path is not about accomplishing anything. It's about really fundamentally seeing what Trungpa Rinpoche pointed out in his book that we study, I think once a week or twice a week, is cutting through spiritual materialism. The materialism of materialism, we're going to have to do some of that. You're going to have to get your car fixed, or you're going to have to generate a livelihood, and all those being a living being. But someone who is on the spiritual path and you're a fully ordained monk, then just continue to look at it. Look at the way we conclude. Look at the way we name. Just look at what you're doing using the 5 dharmas. You're taking yourself into a very fundamental operation of consciousness where something arises, a thought, and we notice that we immediately do something with it. So when you liberate yourself, thoughts may come and you won't be concerned about how you feel. You'll be able to actually watch negative feelings come in with all their little stories, all tagging along with them. It's because she said, they did, and I'm didn't, and I'm ready to just strangle her or him, or I'm going to run out, or I'm going to throw my robes in the trash, or don't do that. Don't believe your thoughts. Don't disbelieve your thoughts. Don't do anything with them. And the only way I know of that you can practice that is by seeing that thoughts are empty of a thinker. There's no one's generating anything. There's no personhood. You have to realize it. And that can be difficult. And it may be, as long as you have some stories about everything, that kind of protects you from the fundamental oblivion of no self, the fundamental oblivion of going into the darkness, and such that you don't care if you come back or not. You don't need something else to happen. If you need something else to happen, you're trapped in relative truth. If you don't care what happens, I'm not talking about dismissively, because you really care about everyone. There are no separate beings anymore. And that doesn't mean you care about them in such a way that you're going to help them rob a bank, or care about them in such a way that you can see that the shit they're dealing with, they're going to need to deal with that, rather than you're going to save them from that. It needs to be a teaching. If it's not a teaching, then maybe there's no teacher there. If it's a teacher, the teacher has to be, if it's going to be a true teacher, they have to be liberated. And when I say liberated, they're here, they have a physical form, they wave their hand, or they pick their nose, or swear, or do whatever. They live like anybody else, they're ordinary. But they're no longer attached, nor are they detached. No position anymore. You can do that. You can do that, Freedom Mountain. You can do that. It's already the case. Just stop fighting it. The fancy word, go ahead.
Is what I'm doing with what I'm projecting just another round of form, naming, and projection?
Yes. It's called samsara, circle. That means circle. But everything is circles. That's why I say don't use a digital clock because it takes you into a conceptual area that doesn't help you. The circularity of the clock is very helpful. Started out as being a sundial. Then they put wheels on it, I think. Artificial sundial, is that a clock? Are there actually wires going from here to the sun? It's interesting to say something like that and look at the people on
No.
Who said no? Who said that?
Bob Bowie.
Your dad said that. Your daughter's listening to you here, so you're not going to get away with much. Okay, so further, we're way at the end of our sojourn here. So maybe one final question somewhere from someone who has a question.
Kayandang, there's a question in the chat.
Okay, let's do it.
From Shoka, who says, what is threatening to the ego about depression? Bowing.
Well, the ego mind has confused thinking going on, thinks something is wrong, and that needs to be stopped or fixed. And the awakened mind, the Buddha nature, if you've made the shift, I don't know how else to say it. It's not really a shift. It's just if you stop covering up your enlightened nature with the complications and the agenda, the propaganda of the seventh consciousness, that which thinks there's somebody who's going to be harmed. Those are just feelings. That's life is suffering. If you need it, Ashoka, go back and repeat the first noble truth. You don't need the other three. Go back to the first noble truth. Life is suffering. Stop fighting with that. Because that's the part that pulls us away into wanting things to be different. So you're going to have to really realize that life is suffering. It's not a bad thing. We have nerve endings. Even though we can come up with ways of dealing with that, there's no Novocaine for depression. And if there is, then don't use it. Receive the depression. Receive it. I'm not saying that one person say, this is pretty bad, I'm going to have to use this drug or that drug, or do this or that. Maybe you might have to do some of that. But that would be situational. If you're meditating and if you're training your mind and you've spent a few days, few years, few decades training your mind, I wouldn't argue with you. You say, I really need to get some weed and get high. I would say, well, go do that. Or if someone else said I need to, take ayahuasca, I wouldn't fight with you on it. I would say, well, what about that? Do you know anything about it? Or what's it like? Have you done it before? So it would be situational. But basically, my basic feedback for anybody, kind of generic, is get to the wall, hold still. People have been doing this for thousands of years without anything. Sit down, hold still, watch what moves, realize your true nature. And how do you do that? You have to look at the cover-ups. And one of the cover-ups is what? Depression. And it's not just the depression, it's the naming. It's something arises, depression, we name it, and then we have ideas about it. It's a very good example. And I would say don't do anything but just observe it. Eventually, if you just observe it, the very naming itself and the very commentary about it starts to come apart because they're dependently risen, and they are based on fear of being hurt, fear of disillusion. Very difficult to do. You can't get free. You can't get free of something. How do I want to say this? Warfare doesn't work. You can't fight something, even though common cultural thing is we have to the war on drugs and the war on this and the war on that, fighting with other political parties, and all that positionality is quite frustrating for all of us, I think. Thank you so much.
Hi, this is Chiezan, the prior at SokukoJi Buddhist Monastery. Sokuzan offers these talks without expecting anything in return. If you value these talks and would like them to continue, please visit our donate page at www.sokukoji.org. Thank you.